Welcome to the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Kate Moore-Youssef, and I'm a wellbeing and lifestyle coach, EFT practitioner, mum to 4 kids, and passionate about helping more women to understand and accept their amazing ADHD brains. After speaking to many women just like me, and probably you, I know there is a need for more health and lifestyle support for women newly diagnosed with ADHD. In these conversations, you'll learn from insightful guests, hear new findings, and discover powerful perspectives and lifestyle tools to enable you to live your most fulfilled, calm, and purposeful life wherever you are on your ADHD journey. Here's today's episode. Today, I'm sitting down with ADHD authors and advocates. So we've got Bontle, Senne and Sara-Louise Ackrill, and they have written a book which I think many of us will find very interesting. So today we are going to be talking about sex, relationships, and really being able to understand ourselves better through this new neurodivergent lens. I'm really happy to have you here, Sara-Louise and Bontle, and I'm really happy to be able to talk about your new book and really bring to life what it's like to live as someone late diagnosed neurodivergent and how we can build on this so we can have better relationships, communication, sex lives, all of that after probably many decades of not quite understanding ourselves and not being able to communicate our needs properly. So first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And yeah, your book is The ND Lovers Club, How Neurodivergent Women Lust, Like and Love. And this sounds like a book so many of us need. I was wondering, maybe one of you can start with what drove you to write this book, especially together.
What drove us to write it? Years of pain, years of acquiring expertise and helping others. A real combination of the personal and the professional, I would say. It was really cathartic, and the fact that we found each other by complete mistake online. Bontle Googled me and wanted to work with me on my business and me work with her business, and we ended up going, actually, no, I don't think this is what we were meant to be doing. Oh, but we could write a book, and I've always wanted to write about this, and so that's how it happened. We met each other. We wanted to maximize the other amazing person that we'd met, and then we didn't really know what to do with that energy, and then it culminated in a book about sex.
I love that. So tell me a little bit. So you've married, excuse the pun, your different kind of expertise, your specialism. So tell me a little bit, Sara, about yours, and then Bontle, tell me a little bit about yours and how you've brought that together to create this book.
Well, I always wanted to be a therapist, and I finally trained in my late 20s, and I'm now nearly 47. So I wanted to be a therapist in order to support people with really complex emotional difficulties. And through that, I realized, because obviously you have to have a lot of therapy yourself, I realized that most therapists don't really deal with relationships or sex in any meaningful way. In fact, I find it interesting because lots of my clients will say, I know I talked to you about all this other stuff, but can I talk about sex? And they're always really kind of guarded. And my own journey just meant that, I just naturally started to be more confident talking to people about it. And that's how I ended up working in it as well as experiencing things myself.
Okay. And Bontle, what's your background?
So my background is in coaching rather than therapy. And I did a number of different types of coaching: executive, leadership, health, and ADHD, before discovering that I actually don't like coaching very much. So awkwardly, I don't do very much of it anymore. However, I've been a writer for a long time. And I thought what I could bring to the project is Sara has a really great view of multiple people. She's seen it over and over again. And I have a very kind of deep view on the things that I want to talk about in my lived experience and my sexual awakening in my 30s and all of those things. So it's a really good balance between the two of us, because I also share much more personal information than Sara might necessarily.
Okay. So, and you're both ADHD. So you both relate to obviously the traits of both autism and ADHD. And I'm sure it probably shows it very uniquely for both of you in different ways, like it does for all of us. And we do know now that the crossover is much more common than we thought. And if we are diagnosed with one or the other, the blend is more likely to be there than not there. I think as women, especially as we're getting towards our midlife and going through that, the stresses are there. they're getting bigger, they're getting harder to handle. We're, like you said, we're getting this awakening as well. We're understanding ourselves for the first time. And I think, sex is not talked about enough. It's not talked enough about on this podcast. I think probably as I'm getting older, I'm getting a bit braver. I've realized that my kids and my husband don't listen to this podcast.
Right.
And sometimes my mum does, but but I'm going to be really brave today, and I'm going to lean in to a conversation which I know is probably going to be very helpful for a lot of women who are just wanting to understand themselves and be like, so like, that's why I do this, and that's why I feel this, or that's why, sometimes that's really hard for me. And maybe we can just go there and, hear from both of you what you guys are hearing on the ground and what you've written about in the book, and how women can start helping themselves and communicating better with their partners.
One of the things that I'm most passionate about this book is that we wrote it so that people would not feel broken. We understand that for a lot of ADHD women, they're perceived as kind of this manic pixie girl, and it's so cute and they're so forgetful and whatever. And that kind of reducing us to almost children is a really annoying subset, in the same way as autistic people are reduced to basically being of child intelligence and not really understanding anything. And all of those kind of stereotypes, we were trying to look around to try and find something that represented us and couldn't find it. So I think what's going on the ground is a lot more women are being diagnosed, obviously, later in life. I think a lot more women are also finding sex and finding their body later in life, simply because there's more divorces and people are, marrying a bit later and all of these things that has really, and honestly, I think more acceptance of menopause has also helped, because women in menopause are also now showing up and going, I want sex too. I'm having sex too. It's just changed slightly. And the overlap between things of menopause and neurodiversity is really interesting. But essentially we say, respect what your body wants. Understand that you're always going to be chasing dopamine. So you may make some poor sexual decisions unless you can really work out how to deal with your impulsivity. There's going to be overwhelm from a number of different things. And you have to be able to advocate for your needs, because the more you try to mask, the more you try to hide, the more you try to do things that are nice for your partner or will suit them or that they like in bed, etc., it just results in you getting to the state of complete burnout, because you can't keep being a fake all the time, especially not with your intimate partner.
Yeah. Sarah, what have you got to say on that?
I was going to say, in terms of the landscape, when we were writing the book, we were looking around for materials to kind of bounce off or build on and not reinvent the wheel. But the only two things I found were Emma Sale, who is a big heroine of mine, who did a jacket comment, actually, a testimonial. She created Killing Kittens when she was 25, which is an amazing empire of sex positivity. And also Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity. Bontle talks about an awakening. I think my awakening was discovering Killing Kittens was a thing, discovering things like Field, which is a really great sex positive app, and Mating in Captivity. And that was it. That was all I had to go on. I didn't even know anyone who knew those resources. I couldn't talk to anyone about them, but I found them. So it was pretty bleak out there. And some of the stuff Bontle describes, like menopause or dopamine, I've never seen any of those things mentioned in sex and relationship books at all.
Yeah. I mean, I love Esther Perel. I love her work. For me, it comes down to a lot of I didn't understand my sensory needs and the sensory side that would either make my, like, everything just tense up, or I just was like, oh my God, that's not for me. Or why does that feel good? And because I didn't know I was ADHD, I didn't understand about the sensory side. And so I probably shamed myself or told myself, like, just to push through and all of that. And then when we understand that, like, why are we not understanding, like, as women, like, why do we not get that we have different sensory needs, and certain things turn us on and certain things really turn us off? Like, I have a thing about breath, and I have a thing about being breathed on. And I'm like, it's really hard for me. And so obviously that breath comes in with sex. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about sensory needs as well. I'd love to hear more.
Well, I know
Oh my goodness, where do we
we'll
start?
definitely want to talk about this, but the one thing I want to say beforehand is to answer your question about why we are not paying more attention to our sensory needs, etc. People should remember that, we're also women in addition to being ADHD, and society has very much trained us that your discomfort is fine as long as you are looking after others, as long as they are good and you are perceived as someone who cares about them, then it's all good. And I think when you layer that on top of, trying to fit in, trying to be normal in very inverted commas, I think it just gets to the point where you are constantly trying to do this, even in bed, going, regardless of what I'm feeling, it's totally fine as long as he or she or they are okay, right? And that's the sadness for me, because it's almost on top of our ADHD, we also have to deal with those ideas about womanhood.
How would you, I guess, if someone is new to this and they want to communicate with their partner, they love their partner, but their sexual health or their relationship is definitely not as good as they would like it to be. They're not communicating properly. Like, how do you start this conversation, especially if you're not with a neurodivergent partner, or you might be both neurodivergent but have very different sensory needs and your energy needs, sexual needs, like all of this, like how do we blend that together? Because a lot of people give up. They go, yeah, I love this person, but our sex life is just not the way it should be. How do we stay and grow and evolve together, especially with this neurodivergent awareness?
It's really terrifying accepting that it's a need, because that could destabilize having a relationship, right? You could be like, I have this need, it's not being met. And the ultimate thing could be you're not with the right person. But a lot of the time, it's not that. A lot of desire, we think that desire is spontaneous, but it's very often reactive. That was the first thing I learned when I had sex coaching. I lost my virginity to 6 black plastic tubes once I'd had my hymen removed by a doctor. So the idea of me becoming some kind of person who's written a sex book with Bontle is hilarious, because I couldn't even do the basics of losing my own virginity. But what I've learned by being so alien and estranged from my own body is there's no representation of difference. So these conversations are really hard. And I think I have learned through having sex coaching and relationship therapy myself that actually being able to say things in an empowered way rather than going, I just hate sex, this isn't working, and shutting down, by being kind of like, you know what, I think we might be making some assumptions here that things are going to turn us on, and I can't really honestly say it's doing it for me. Could we look at something else? Could we look at going to work with someone and discussing it? Although the problem, I think, is a lot of people think that the suggestion of sex therapy or coaching in a relationship means it's the beginning of the end. And actually, it can be the beginning. It can be a kind of like, how do we make this look in the future? It can be beautiful, but it's really hard if you're the one being proposed to and having this idea given to you. It can be hard to trust that the person isn't kind of trying to say, look, I think we might be breaking up.
I think if I am trying to also talk to someone about how they open up that conversation when they do feel like they may be breaking up, the first thing is don't have that conversation in bed. Do not have that conversation when your feelings are elevated, when you're either overexcited or really feeling down. You need to pick a calm moment where you both can speak in private without anyone else listening to you. And then I think you need to also talk about what actually turns you on, right? Some people have a little yes/no form that they make, and it has all sorts of different things. You can find many of them online, and you just give it to your partner and say like, hey, this is my line, or you do yours first, or whatever you want to do, you do it together. As long as you can do it in an honest way, you can turn it almost into a bit of a game. It's like, hey, I'm going to discover interesting things about you. And even something that you love, you then can have a conversation, if they don't like that, about how to make that work. You can add your sensory needs to that list as well, right? Like, I need to have sex with music on. I need to have sex in a certain temperature. All of those things allow you to advocate for your needs without having to explicitly say things or say it as though your partner is lacking, right? You can, in that way, I think, have a really good conversation. And the third thing I would say is people forget about non-sexual touching. And they forget that the needs that they have as humans to just touch. And usually if there's problems with the sex life, people forget about non-sexual touching. So I would say ban sex for a month. Just actually ban it. And in that time, spend the time touching each other, right? just tenderly, etc. You can fool around a little bit, but really be quiet, be in bed, touch each other, hug each other, kiss each other, but no sex. Because you'll find that the more time you spend, with that intimacy and that touch, it starts to trigger a little bit of that desire. And then you can figure out what to do with it. And if you end up having sex in that month, totally fine. But there's no pressure. And the pressure is the big problem.
The pressure, absolutely. Sarah, I know that you wanted to say something.
We thought that we were writing a book about sex, and when we put out all the topics we were going to cover, we realized that the one thing we hadn't written was love. And what we ended up doing, because it took 2 years, this book, is writing a book about connection and intimacy. And I think, I'll speak for myself, but I think that both of us got comfortable with intimacy in a way maybe we hadn't been previously. Bontle's nodding and not hating on me, so that's good. Sorry about that. But we did genuinely, like, we'd had lots of experiences, we kind of knew that we had imaginations, and we were quite confident, and we were quite okay with meeting new people and experimenting. We were quite out there in some of the things that we could and had done, but we weren't comfortable with intimacy. And on the sensory point, I wanted to say this whole breath thing is a massive thing with sex and kissing and everything. And I have this too. I can't use mint toothpaste. I can't be around anyone who's been anything around mint. And of course, the minute you start having a hookup or a date, people start using gum, or they start using a mouthwash or whatever. And I can't. So I would meet people and be like, by the way, I don't know, get some lemon juice or something. But that's a big thing. And actually, a lot of mums find out that their kids are autistic from the fact that they hate brushing their teeth, and they find out that they can't stand anything mentholated or mint. And I just wanted to mention that, because personal hygiene and sex and all of that is very, very linked.
That's so interesting. I'd not heard of that before. That's really interesting. So out of interest, what do you prefer then? What if it's not going to be like a mint toothpaste or anything, what would be that preference for you?
That they use like a child's mouthwash, like a berry or a lemon. You can get there's a brand out there. You can get Black Forest Gatto. You can get, I've never really had a toothpaste that isn't like lemon or lime with the full fluoride. A lot of people think if you use herbal or if you use a child's dental care, there won't be enough fluoride, and that's not true. Those of us that are okay with using fluoride. So there are loads of options. I know in the Kama Sutra, I think they talk about chewing on seeds and things to freshen up, and fennel,
I have to have someone with freshly mouthwashed or brushed teeth, or whatever. Bad breath is my thing, and I can't handle it, right? I've literally said to people, like, started making out and then been like, you know what? Please go to the bathroom and brush your teeth. You can use my toothbrush. I don't care. It's weird, but I can't do this.
Yeah. So I'm not going to pry too much into your personal lives, but I don't know if you have long-term partners now or not. But if you have been with a long-term partner and you're still together, and there's kids, there's life, there's work, there's responsibilities, and that spark, like, you want to maintain that spark. And like you say, like, I got a thing, like, I smell, like, my sense of smell is off the charts. I can smell absolutely everything, and that is hard. And so personal hygiene is a big deal, and it can sound a little bit like you're being critical or rude. And I can be a bit blunt sometimes, because once I've smelt something, that's it. Everything, it's gone out the window. I think it must be hard to be married to me, because I'm so picky, and these words, the shame, the words and all of that.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
And it's hard, because you kind of want to make that other person feel good as well, but it's trying to bring them in, isn't it? So they can understand. And, thankfully my husband is quite understanding. I wonder, how do we have those conversations with the partner who is kind of on board, but still a bit like, oh, that's rude, or you're being critical, or you're being a bit stuck in your ways, or all the words that we hear, especially as the neurodivergent one?
Wow. I was the one who was in a long-term neurotypical and neurodivergent mixed relationship in my marriage. Sarah is very lucky that she has a neurodivergent partner, and so she's on a different journey, so she can speak to hers. But I think that one of the most important things I had to learn is no one's doing you a favor by loving you. You are not difficult to love or be in a relationship with. Who else might be, triathletes, right? they're terrible to be in a relationship with because they're always training and they're always busy, professional athletes are the same thing. Actors have to travel all the time. Someone who has 3 kids from a divorce. There are many things that make us all difficult to date. And I think that as neurodivergent women, we internalize a lot of those things and assume that it must be this terrible burden really to deal with us. And it's awkward because a lot of the neurotypical people who've written books about being in relationships with ND people, it does sound like, please give me a medal because I am doing the work by being with this person and suffering through this. And so the first thing is really getting rid of that language in your mind, I think, before you even get to talking about anything. Get rid of the idea that they're doing you a favor. And once you've done that, you can really see what your real relationship is like. Because I discovered that my relationship was built on someone who was always saving me. And I was this damsel who couldn't go shopping or couldn't, pay the rent on time or whatever. And he was just swooping in to fix everything. But then when I grew up a little bit, got a bit more confident, understood myself a bit more, I wanted to do things myself. And that wasn't okay at that stage, right? I wish I'd taken the time to go, I'm not being difficult, but how are you responding to this?
Yeah, God, it just shows, doesn't it? Communication is everything. And just being able to have these open communication, open conversations can really make or break a marriage or a partnership, or, it really just to be able to have validation. Because when we don't have the language, or we're not even sure what our reality is, or we've been gaslit, or we've believed that we've been the problem, then I think professional help is a must. I mean, I've literally just wrote a post before we came onto this conversation, interestingly, about I wonder if therapy and marriage counseling or anything like this should be as mandatory as like an MOT. Like we pay our mortgage, we have to do an MOT, we have to do certain things because it's been demanded from us. But actually, we should be investing in our self-development and our mental well-being the same way as we invest in all the other things. And think about the prevention side, like the prevention of marriage and partnership breakdowns. Think about that knock-on effect, like being able to grow together as a relationship, I think is profound, especially when you want to have a long-term relationship and you want to kind of grow together. So as you have probably heard, I have a new book coming out very, very soon. It's called the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Toolkit. It's out on the 17th of July. And I am so excited. I'm talking about it nonstop because I genuinely believe that this book is going to be a game changer, and it's going to help so many people, because everything I talk about on this podcast is condensed into this book, into some really manageable but bite-sized chapters. I'm going to be talking about anxiety, RSD, hormones, the nervous system, lessening anxiety, awakening who we uniquely are, like literally leaning into self-acceptance, more joy, more creativity, more fulfillment. I've blended all the things I absolutely love, such as the ADHD psychoeducation, but alongside it, more of the coaching modalities that I've learned, EFT, and more of the spiritual side that I love to work with as well. I've really created a toolkit that I know will help so many people, whether you are newly diagnosed, you're not diagnosed, you're sort of self-identifying, or you've had this diagnosis or this awareness for a really long time and you're ready to feel more self-empowered and self-led. I really hope that this book gives you that opportunity to dip in and dip out. And when you're feeling like you need that extra handhold through the day, I promise you're going to find that guidance and that help and that support in the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Toolkit. Now, this book is available on all online platforms, but I urge you to go in to your local Waterstones, for example, and go in and feel it, look at it, flick through it, and really get a feel for what the book is about, because there's nothing better than holding a book in real life and being able to touch the pages and have a little glance through it before you buy it. So I'm really excited. July the 17th, it's going to be on the shelves in the bookstores, but it's available to pre-order now. Now, if you pre-order it and you go to my website on the book page and you put in your order number, you will then be able to get free access to an amazing live Q&A workshop I'm doing in July, and also some incredible downloads about ADHD, holistic care and the supplements. I've created this 18-page PDF for you. So I really hope that it's giving you lots of free resources and lots of guidance to keep you going until the book comes out. Thank you so much. And now to the podcast. Sara, I was wondering maybe what kind of like advice that you have with regards to someone listening now who does want to have more of these open conversations. I know that you are a therapist, and like, how
Oh.
do you, I guess, work with couples who are coming? I don't know if you do work with couples or not,
I don't see
or
couples, I see individuals.
okay.
Mainly because of being autistic, I find all the dynamics in one space quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
But what I would say is you're podcasting, Bontle as a sex coach and a writer, I'm a therapist. It's easy for us in a way to talk about this stuff. And I'm always surprised when I speak to clients at how hard it is to mention this stuff. But I also know it's hard. It's easy to coexist with a partner, to be dating or to live together and to sort of be parallel to each other's lives. It's hard to look them in the eye, especially when you're autistic. It's hard to look them in the eye and go, you know what, this isn't enough. This isn't working. I need you to touch me. I need you to do that. I need you to never clean your teeth right before kissing me. I know it's really hard to look someone in the eye and be that blunt about sex. And it's great to learn that it's not an optional extra. It's an essential part of our being. Whether you're spiritual or not, it's our life force, it's our energy. It's, if you want to talk about chakra health or whatever, like, we all relate to the fact that you can't just cut your sexual energy out and act like it's not happening. But I know that it's risky to address it. My tips would be things like, if you're having to constantly mention that you're neurodivergent, then you're not feeling psychologically safe to just relax and be neurodivergent. So there needs to be some discussion around what being neurodivergent even means to start with. And I think that psychological safety is really, really important. You might also want to make a decision as to whether you want to be with a neurodivergent person specifically. I actually find a great refuge in friends and partners who come from some kind of minority background of any kind, because I feel that what people of minority backgrounds have in common is they know what it's like to be othered in different ways, and they know what it's like to not feel psychologically safe and to be on hyper vigilant and hyper alert all the time. So my advice could be, do you want to be with someone who's neurotypical and not getting it? They might be neurotypical and getting it. I'm not saying don't date neurotypicals. That's not the point. But they need to get, I think, the psychological safety and the fact that masking for us is a survival instinct. It's not a cute and quirky mask that we put on and off like this chameleon image. It very much is survival. It's keeping us alive. Masking is fundamental. And I think if someone doesn't understand that, you've got real issues in the relationship way below the level of having sex with them.
Yeah, I think that psychological safety is so validating and so important to hear you say those words. Like, again, it's the articulation of something like, oh, that is what I'm not feeling. I'm
Yeah.
not feeling understood. I'm not feeling like someone is taking an interest in what works for me. Like you say, if I drop this mask and I'm authentic, like, will I still be accepted, and will I still be loved, and will I still be that person that they want to be with? And being able to know that we're held and we're in a safe space, and we can start being a bit more articulate with our needs.
Well, as Bontle says, nobody goes into a relationship with nothing, right? We all have something that the other person needs to get used to or tolerate or compromise over, etc. And I think that it's important that people either get comfortable with themselves and how they want to show up as an ND person in a relationship, but you don't always have to label things. If you're someone who isn't into labels, you're self-diagnosed, you don't really want to medicalize your conversation with your partner, you can say, this is giving me the ick. I'm not keen on that. You can say, I'd rather you didn't. You don't have to say, I have a sensory sensitivity. You can phrase it how you like, but unless you do the work, you accept yourself, you learn about yourself, you learn to self-advocate, you can't really communicate with another person. So it really is an inside job before establishing the fundamentals with the others. I went on so many dates where I'd be like, well, I'm actually autistic. And they'd be like, right, well, I'm guessing it doesn't expect too much because you've got a business and you seem fine kind of thing. And that was so offensive. But then I was thinking, what did I expect them to do with that? Now when I see dating profiles and the person goes, I've got ADHD, I'm like, cool, but what do you want the person to, that doesn't really tell them anything about you in a way. Like when you're self-disclosing, I would say this even in the workplace, to what end are you self-disclosing? So sticking on a dating profile, I'm ADHD, or telling your partner, I'm going to get diagnosed, that is one thing. And that could be serving a purpose. But what are you trying to achieve by saying it? Because if it's, in my case, it was, I'm going to put it out there now because in 3 dates, I'm going to become a clingy, horrible, emotional mess. And you're going to think I'm an idiot and not want to see me again. Then I was like, well, maybe that's the bit I need to look at. Why in 3 dates' time am I going to be a clingy, emotional mess? Oh, because I will have unmasked and I'll be sick of it by then. And then they won't like me for who they thought I was. Right. Okay, we'll deal with that then. But just telling them, oh, by the way, I'm autistic or I'm ND isn't really mitigating for the complication further down the line when I stop masking.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Are you seeing a difference or a change in mindset or an evolution from, say, our generation, and I'm mid-40s, to a younger generation, even in early 30s? Are they advocating for themselves? Are they more empowered with it being able to have these conversations? Or is this still sort of like a generational female pattern that we're seeing of where we are struggling? We are, even from, 20s, 30s, that we're still finding it hard to step into this sort of place of self-authority.
Well, I see people who are 16 and I see people in their 70s.
Okay.
And I think what makes the difference is when they found out and how they go about processing their life presently and retroactively through the lens of neurodiversity. Whether they are 16 or 70 actually is not what makes them more or less good at accepting, advocating, as you might think it would. You might think it was generational. I think it's more about the fact that we are where we are today in society, and this is how we view it. And here are the people of all the different age groups now dealing with that. It's more of a societal thing rather than a generational thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think obviously it's going to change geographically as well, because what is true in the UK may not be true in, Ghana. But for me, I'm definitely seeing that women in their 20s, 100% are still trying to do whatever they can to please their partner because they just kind of don't know any better. But a lot of people are going into their 30s and opting out of the system entirely. So just going, dating's not really worth it. Everything is expensive. I don't really feel like I'm going to have a wedding. What is the point of this? I'd rather be with my friends because my friends actually have much longer relationships with them. I can count on them. I can't really count on dating. So that's been a trend that we're seeing all over the world, right? And it is as women become more financially independent in their 30s as well, that now people are just going, I don't think this is really worth, the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Yes. And take that as you want, I think.
Well, we didn't have that one in the book. You did come out with some corkers, but we didn't have that one.
That's the name of your next book.
I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I am hearing similar as well. Especially you see the rise of women having children on their own, using sperm donors, choosing that they would rather parent and do it on their own rather than kind of settle for someone who is not right for them or that they have to change or mask. And I feel like that is maybe an interesting way that it's going. But I wonder, is that also detrimental to being able to learn how to evolve and grow together as well? I don't know.
I think that, neurodivergent people often have different understandings of what relationship means and are often much more open to things like ethical non-monogamy or, polyamory, etc. And so maybe you don't want to grow and learn with this person. Maybe you're going, this is a 2-year thing. We're going to both enjoy it and have a great time and be intimate and be friends and then leave, right? You can decide to do those things. But I think I'm not sure that people are missing out on things if people don't have the emotional intelligence and the emotional availability to do those things with them, right? Because I'm not really seeing lesbians not dating. It does seem to be a very heterosexual thing. And it's a little, and the men are trash. We don't really need to go into that kind of discourse. But I think it is women who are looking at that and going, it's not worth it. And it's not just from the perspective of it won't be fun. We have a part in the book where we talk about, how do you know when it's time to leave? Because neurodivergent women have a much higher likelihood of being in situations where there's domestic violence or there's psychological abuse or coercion, gaslighting. And so you begin to not trust yourself at all and keep on staying in these situations where someone is bringing down your confidence and your self-esteem and not helping you move forward. In that situation, you're never going to grow with that person, right? You are going to, in fact, keep on shrinking. So there is a certain point at which I think people have to go, like, is this relationship serving me? If this person was my friend, would I put up with this behavior? If my friend was with this person, what would I advise them? Depersonalize it in some way, take yourself out of that context, because otherwise you may end up kind of sleepwalking into a relationship thinking we're going to be together, we're going to grow together, and then hanging on to it because you want that dream of the 40-year wedding anniversary or whatever, right?
Yeah. I think what's interesting is that a lot of women who are getting this awareness, these diagnoses in midlife, it's colliding with menopause, perimenopause, and that they're both awakenings, aren't they? If you're, ND or not, you are going to have this shift and this change of chapter during perimenopause. And it's like we're peeling away layers and becoming someone else. And then we have this understanding of our brain and our nervous system and hormones and everything that comes with this that we've had but just didn't know what it was. And I see this in my community a lot, that women are just going, sod this, I'm out, I'm not with this person anymore, I'm changing my career, I'm moving, like things are changing because I've settled for so long. It's like a big eruption. And so yeah, I think it's exciting, but it's hard as well. It's very unsettling, and it's like everything has to break down to be rebuilt again. Are you seeing this as well, Sarah?
Well, I was just going to say settling is a big thing with autism, isn't it? Because it's better the devil you know. It's a routine of sorts. It's really hard to break a routine, even if it's a painful and an abusive one, even. Bontle mentioned abuse. We're far more likely to have coercive control and other forms of domestic and intimate partner violence in our lives. We're also more likely to be in poverty, and we're more likely to have complex trauma and to bulldoze over the red flags of real distress and difficulty in our life because it's become so normal. So for all of these reasons, you can see why we might stay, and we might even think, well, God, a good sex life is a bit of a luxury. To be fair, I might as well just be here, and at least I'm safe. I can see how we do that. I know how we do that. I've been there. I've had 4 abusive partners, and I know that a lot of the time it was easier to be with someone who was abusive than dealing with my own intrusive thoughts, because being intimate with people put me on overload. I couldn't process. I now know that my intrusive thoughts and OCD, which are very overlapping with autism and ADHD, and I now have perimenopause as well. And yesterday I got told I've probably developed PMDD because the 10 days before every period at the moment are off the scale worrying, like really, really terrifying. And I didn't even know until yesterday that you can develop PMDD in later life. And I want to share that information because I got that from a doctor, and I think that's quite important.
As you're talking about this, it also made me think, for a lot of my friends who got divorces in our early 30s and continued kind of doing the divorce thing into mid 30s, late 30s, early 40s, the one awakening that we're happening, as often because it comes with diagnoses, is we're learning that all the things we thought were faults aren't faults. There's not bugs in the code, right? These are how your brain works. You don't have a choice about some of it. And honestly, there are some really great things about being in relationships with people who are neurodivergent, right? And I think that as women are more accepting of themselves and their symptoms, they're going, these aren't really symptoms. They're kind of just traits. And you can take them or leave them, but I'm pretty great. I am creative. I believe in justice. My heart is so huge. I will do anything for you. I'm super loyal. All I want to do is solve problems, love sex. All of these things, right, can make you a fabulous partner. And I think a lot of women that I've met certainly are just like, if he didn't see that, that's him.
Amazing. I love that. Because when you look at the books, when we were writing our book, I was like trying to find books on this stuff, and it was all about how your male Asperger's partner is a nightmare and you deserve a medal for being with him, or, you know, how an Asperger's male partner will be cold and unloving and potentially even borderline narcissistic abusive. And that was it. It was all about men. It was very disparaging about Asperger's men, and it was never about ADHD anyone. It wasn't about women, non-binary people, trans people. It was just quite depressing. And you know, I think that we live in a society where you're either sick and not functioning, or you're well and functioning to a degree. And we don't know enough about the social model of disability and the fact that loads of us are just in the middle somewhere, dealing day to day with just being different statistically. But I just want to say that when we talk about neurodiversity, there will be a lot of people going, oh my God, you know, everyone's on a spectrum, everyone's getting diagnosed. I keep reading the paper, everyone's got a label. We are not all on a spectrum. Neurodivergent people have a brain structure that is intact, like neurotypical people, but they have a markedly different brain activity. So, how we view the world, interpret the world, perceive the world, respond to the world, conceive of the world is 100% different to our neurotypical peers. So, something that involves connection and intimacy and vulnerability and sex and sensory, like, obviously, we're going to process it all through those lenses, but they are differences and we are wonderful people. You know, we're not good or bad because we're neurodivergent. It's just we are, you know, we're on a different kind of mainframe. You know, we're the PCs in a world of Apple Macs or whatever. You know, but we're just different. We're just approaching stuff differently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love that. And the more we have this conversation, we normalize what you just said. It's just like, yeah, okay. So it's okay to still exist and coexist all together, but there's differences. And I accept that those differences and the other differences. And we just kind of learn to live in this ecosystem where there's no right and there's no wrong. And I think, you know, going back to the sex conversation is like saying, how can we create a fulfilling relationship that feels like we're growing and changing and evolving together with understanding, and being able to have a conversation that doesn't feel like we're criticizing, or it doesn't feel like we are kind of nitpicking, and we can ask for what we need. And I think that's really empowering, and it feels positive. So yeah, I'm down for it all. Go for it, Sara.
It is really empowering, but I just wanted to say that when Bontle talks about differences, the reason that point for me is so important is unless we start seeing it as differences and owning it and being proud to show up as who we are ripe for scapegoating. And I will get, as a therapist, I'll get people message me going, my husband needs to see you. Or my child, you know, if it was family therapy, it would be the ND problem child. But the problem will be systemic. The problem will be in the whole. When you're ND, like when you have any other health condition or disability or difference, is very easy, if you're not sure of yourself, to be labeled as the mental one, the psycho one, the problem, the fragile one, the sick one. Meanwhile, everyone else goes about their dysfunctional day in total secrecy and dignity, and we're, you know, and I get
So
sick of it,
true.
and I see the sick one is the babysitter of the family, but they're, you know, or the one that everyone's putting their problems on. Like, there's always a scapegoat, and it's too easy to go, I'm going to send you off for therapy. And it's really a shame how many people get bolstered up by this new learning about themselves, and they want to take their partner on that journey with them, and but the partner is the very defensive and will say, I'm not going to therapy. You sort yourself out. I'm not the neurodivergent one. But the problem is systemic. It is not a you problem. It's a we problem.
So true. Oh my God, yes. I mean, I think this conversation is going to be really helpful, and probably there's going to be pose a lot more questions, and I'm sure you'll get lots of feedback. And I think just to have a conversation like this where we're opening our eyes to different options and different possibilities, and what you just said then is like, it's not always us that has to hold and absorb the problems and absorb the like you say, the scapegoating. That, yeah, like we could be married to someone who is neurotypical but still have lots of different issues that they need to deal with, and it's not just
Sure.
up to us to fix the situation, and either find a way to get over whatever issues that we've got, all the sensory stuff and all the other things, like you say, like with regards to like OCD and the many different traits that we have with our anxiety. And, you know, physical health conditions as well, just from holding and absorbing and sort of trying to maintain this stress without sort of bothering anyone else. It's a huge conversation, and I know that this just having this here will be very helpful. Can you tell me a little bit about if people are wanting to work with you or speak to you both individually, like how do you both work?
Each of us have a website, which is our names. So you can go onto those websites. We also have one that is, if you want to work with the two of us together, built@diverge.com, where the messages go to both of us. And we very much enjoy the experience of doing things apart as much as together. And I think a lot of we're doing now is speaking mostly, actually, rather than, for me, it's not coaching, it's speaking and it's workshops and whatever. And for Sara, she still continues with her therapy. And you can go to Wired Differently, which is her company. She forgets that she's also a founder and a kick-ass CEO. And get help there, because Wired Differently is made entirely for neurodivergent people and for supporting neurodivergent people, especially entrepreneurs. And so if you want to, work in Sara's mode and Sara does not have any time for new clients, I'd suggest Wired Differently.
Amazing. I will make sure that, all of that is in the show notes for sure, as well as the book as well. I want to thank you both so much for being here and sharing your insights. And I think allowing us to have this conversation and allowing us to think differently and to wonder if there's a different way of communicating and having these conversations, and also not settling and not believing that we're the problem, and knowing that we're worthy of more and we're worthy of a good life and a fun life. And, that might look different to perhaps what we believed it was going to look like. So yeah, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If today's episode has been helpful for you and you're looking for even further support, my brand new book, The ADHD Women's Wellbeing Toolkit, is now available to order from anywhere you get your books from. I really hope this book is going to be the ultimate resource for anyone who loves this podcast and wants a deeper dive into all these kinds of conversations. If you head to my website, adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk, you'll find all the information on the book there, which is going to be out on the 17th of July. Thank you so much.